Now, while Alma is getting online, please show us the picture. This is the picture which was cordially provided by TradingView. And the darker areas are something that we had in S&P 500, and lighter would be the Bitcoin futures since the beginning of the year. The future is something, an instrument that we can actually trade in, something that we know better. Interestingly, over those long decades, we start to see the appearance and the emergence of a new asset that would be able to take some place in the portfolios of funds, in the portfolios of private individuals, and if you come to a classical manager, they would advise to have 10% in real estate, 20% in stocks, etc., etc. Maybe with time, there would be a standard advice of having 3% of your assets in cryptocurrencies, or rather crypto assets, some new type of assets. And what would give some way and give some share to crypto assets would be its a lack of correlation with the other assets, and the fact that a more or less mature market is past the crisis, and this is another factor which would play in the hands of this asset to be established. By the way, do we have Alma-Obaeva online now? Alma, can you hear us? Yes, I can hear you. Well, thank you very much. You are our secret guest, so to say. So thanks for being able to join us. So we'll open our panel. And despite the fact that this question of the law of the green light or the red flag to the crypto assets, I mean, it probably would come next, but let's probably start with that. Because again, we had quite a few informational reasons to discuss that, and perhaps I'll now give the floor to Andrey from Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. Maybe others would also join in, but I think that the question that we wanted to discuss last is actually coming to fore. The Russian Union of Industries and Entrepreneurs was actively involved in the development of the law that we are discussing, and I should say right away that initially we thought about that law not as an toolkit to develop virtual assets, those assets that you take more or less out of mid-air, that is mining those assets, but rather those assets that are real, that you digitalize, and that can be used. And as soon as we had some dispute with the regulators, we actually tried to resolve that dispute with the regulators by claiming that business, big business, that is represented in the Russian Union of Industries and Entrepreneurs, would not really require such assets. And we say that from the point of view of big business and its counterparties, this law becomes more or less like a green light law. Why? Because it is going into the legal field of the tools that are being used by corporations already in practice. Now I'm talking about the trade financing, securitization tools, the toolkits for electronic digital mortgages, etc. Perhaps we will be touching upon those a bit later, where those can be applied. So there's a key parameter which makes this law a green light law for big business or medium-sized business is the fact that it actually legalized digitizing any assets and its mix within one single law. The point here is that if you read law, not that still not adopted law, but if you take the investment digital platforms law, then there are some quite utility-based rights and digital rights. And that law, which has not yet been enacted, makes it possible to have two types of digital rights combined in one token, but also use different digital rights within one token. And of course, you now receive a toolkit that would help a market player to choose whether to get goods and services or to more or less use the money orders there. Importantly, it was a question to have those money liabilities put into the token so that you can exchange those financial assets that are associated with the real assets and the services and the digital assets that are linked to the financial liabilities. In terms of the very idea, so that you understand, in terms of terminology, there is a difference between digital assets and the underlying assets. The digital assets are linked to securities or financial liabilities, and utilitarian digital rights are linked to more or less things to the goods and services. And the first idea, though, was probably somebody would compliment that. The first idea is that this law is for big business. For big business, it's a green light to start with the projects. But in practice, when we talk to businesses, the direct interest is shared only by a few corporations. Others are more in the observation role now. They want to see what the regulator would do first, what would be the requirements, because the set of requirements prescribed by the law is quite heavy, and this is something that we need to take into account. And as part of those specialized tasks to meet those requirements is something that people don't want to do. So the market would probably follow the way of creating big platforms, which would be the basis of providing such services. And the possibilities put into that law is probably we should discuss also the role of the credit institutions there. Some people believe that this is a system to replace the existing financial system with a new one. Partially, this is true, but not from the point of view of the subject matter of that law, but from the point of view of objects. The credit institutions can perform many functions there, and that's subject to also interpretation by the central bank. So those can be used by the operators of those utilitarian digital rights. So there can be the organizers of this system, but also the operator of exchanges that support transactions with digital assets. As far as utilitarian digital rights are concerned, then there's ambiguity in the law. It prohibits financial institutions outside the outside the financial institutions put into the list to do that, and which means that the regulator can interpret this in a way that, based on the risk profile, credit institutions cannot really transact with utilitarian digital rights. Maybe this is even good, because in principle, if you take the licensing risk, it is quite feasible for the big credit institutions to first dedicate this business into a separate subsidiary. And this practice shows the story of payment systems, the revocation of licenses of the payment systems causes the suspension of the full business. And here probably it would be feasible to use this interpretation of the regulator to do the same here. Perhaps I provided with a summary, a picture of the law. Well, we're not stopping here. I would like to give the floor now to Alma. Alma, are you online with us? Yes, I'm here. Alma, how do you view the current status of this law? And in your view, maybe you can also compare this with the other jurisdictions. And in the form that it is currently in and is planned to be implemented, do you think it would be to the benefit of this sector's development, or would it be rather like a wasted attempt that would not be practically implemented? Thank you for the question. First of all, I would like to say, or rather to make Vladimir Kozinetz happy. He has been asking me for the ability of corporates to open accounts in central bank. And Volodya, we are very close to that. I'm optimistic about that because there was a report published last week by the central bank about the digital ruble. What is this digital ruble? This is electronic cash. So when you own cash, you own them absolutely. You keep them in hands. So this is your property. But when you put this cash on the deposit with a credit institution, legally speaking, this is no longer your cash or your money. This is the money of that credit institution, but you can dispose of that. But imagine this cash becomes digital, and we all own the most liquid assets of a central bank that is more or less like banknotes in that digital form. And you will all have your wallet, either at private or corporate. So Volodya can keep his cash in central bank electronically, and you can actually settle with others without any intermediaries. For cash, you don't need that. With electronic cash, you can do the same without any intermediaries. The Bank of Russia published a report and is asking for the opinion of the market. Let's just feedback on that we support that.
Along with that, our central bank is not the only one which is dealing with this issue. China has already launched its digital renminbi. They have circulated these digital renminbi. We have millions of yuans in place. Why do I say that? We're discussing the law on digital assets, and central banks has published the report on the digital ruble. But the reality is faster than the laws we pass. We have been working on for 2 years and going to be effective starting next year. If we say that our law allows to issue digital assets, to trade in digital assets, but it doesn't give the function of a payment tool. That was the critical point of the law. So the digital ruble, which can be issued by the central bank, is going to walk through this path. And the tokens of companies can be a payment tool rather than along with the saving means and as a capital gain tool. I've been saying that next year I would like to have in my e-wallet Sber coins, stable coins of Lukoil and Aeroflot. I'd like to see growth of these tokens together with the value of the companies. I would like to use these tokens, paying for the services of the companies, and so associated business-related services provided by other companies. What do I want as well? That's all, actually. Will allow us to do that. Apart from being a payment tool, if digital ruble is going to be reality, we will be able to pay through that. That's all on my side. Before giving the floor to Vladimir, who is very happy, as he might have an opportunity to open accounts directly with the central bank. Probably most participants of this summit are not happy, since we see the representatives of the banks. But I do think that the banks will find the niche for their business providing services if everything is going to move in this field. Vladimir, what is your perspective? What is your relation to the law and report on the digital ruble? Alma, thank you very much for the great news. Discussing that together with you, before we are just killed by the bankers, we discussed the feature of intergroup settlements within one company, as it shouldn't be kind of constant transfers of cash within the group of the companies. We just try to imagine how the transaction of big companies should be based on. If they have an opportunity to have these internal flows at the central bank level, when we discuss different systems in place. Talking about the digital ruble, we need to understand that, roughly speaking, it is ruble. It is a payment tool which happens within the whole framework of issuance. We have two types of ruble: cash and cashless, and it's going to be digital. I do hope that it is going to be non-personified. It's going to have the same feature as cash, so it doesn't have your own stamp, so we'll be able to perform transactions like in cash cases, but it's going to have the best features. So we will have transactions which are going to be non-public, and so it will be very convenient for electronic payments. It's going to be a huge breakthrough for technologies and for retail chains. It's going to drastically change the whole market of collection of payments, collection of cash. Going to have to see different story of payments in acquiring. I'm a treasurer of Rauan company. The average check is quite huge, and with the current acquiring costs, the transactions are quite limited. We have a big cash flow, but this issue will be solved. And this is absolutely new story, and this is going to be very useful. I don't believe that these are going to be big payments and settlements between companies within the business activity, within these industries. As for the retailers, it's going to be a huge technological breakthrough. But in order to do that, digital ruble should be non-personified as just fiat currencies. Rauan, how do you assess the plans of Russian regulators compared with other jurisdictions? Maybe you have some those who are at the forefront. I'd like to add an international context to our discussion. As year on year, we see fewer gray spots in jurisdictions which do not have attitude to digital assets. overall, each country takes restrictive or inclusive position regarding crypto assets, digital assets. The first example can be India, which adopted 2011, restricting any use and turnover storage of any cryptocurrencies, which was against just common users' interests. Therefore, at the second half 2019, they reversed their decision, which, to a number of reasons, starting next year, is going to be reversed back. This is very uncertain position led to the expected result. Decrease in interest in these platforms among average users, being an international platform and which has users in all the countries. We have very interesting breakdown of how digital assets are popular and interesting. In India, the share of people with interest in that amounts to 1%, with average figure of 8 to 9% in different countries. So regardless of further solutions on the local markets, they will require huge effort to restore this interest in digital assets. The counterexample would be Thailand. Not evident regulation, which doesn't have enough competences. They managed to shape a very loyal and systematic position. 2018, they passed a law on digital assets, which in fact recognized all the popular methods and registered in 2018 with later first 4 users and started to have a half-year audit of them. This very active process. There are first revoked licenses, new 6 users on the market, and they are distributed in different categories. There are digital exchanges and payment providers. As for the law passed, the constraints on use of digital assets as a payment tool looks the most stringent constraint. And briefly, on the prospects and functionality of corporate tokens, as it is one of the issues we need to discuss today. From my perspective, the peg to a particular corporate structure is going to make such corporate assets functional continuation of our current bonus programs. We'd like to see the digital assets to have a wider field of use. Thank you for your input. While discussing all these issues, I have a question. From my perspective, the founding fathers of this type of assets, of this class of assets, implied overarching nationalities. This is one of the basic principles of crypto assets, to be over-national. So these jurisdictions are trying to somehow prohibit that. You cannot pay using digital assets, but inside my jurisdiction, doesn't it seem to you? So let's start with Rauan and move clockwise. So don't you think that the attempt to regulate and to create crypto assets, which can be used in just single jurisdiction, is a very short and non-reasonable story at all. I wouldn't agree with you in this respect, since the digital asset is of a technological nature, and the process can be compared with the licensing or certification of the same technology in different countries. It looks the same. As of today, the proclaimed anonymity is not the case anymore, and there is particular disclosure of data within blockchain, which can allow regulators to get access to the data and to include these data in a major payment process. The local regulation, is it a story for years to come or just for a short period of time? We shouldn't confuse these two things. These are two different types of assets. I would like to reiterate, talking about the crypto ruble, this is another type of our national currency. This is another form of it. Talking about digital assets, you can regulate whatever you want if it is a required market. Whenever people believe that Bitcoin might be used as a payment tool, there won't be any problem. So it cannot be subject to any regulation. Alma, talking about the digital ruble, will it be possible for the whole world to use this? To this digital ruble, it might be the case just for Rauan company. Yeah, particularly for Rauan company, my favorite ones. So you are FX association. What is it? FX turnover? The National Central Bank issues fiat currency, and so it can be convertible. This is the benefit of the economy. If there is demand for settlements in crypto ruble beyond Russia, there should be an access. But the issuance cannot be infinite. There are some mechanisms to regulate these issuance. On the other hand, there is a question concerning conversion of digital ruble into digital US dollar and in many other currencies. This is a very actually entertaining issue, and how it's going to be solved on different platforms, we have to see. This is fiat currency. Talking about the corporate currencies, private tokens, this is the question connected with risks. This, how they can be traded on the market. So this is a question more about not only national but subnational regulation. For example, European Union, Eurasian Economic Union levels. But the trading of the currency is regulated in any country. You are permitted to do what you are permitted to do. But these are the current rules. And every state strives all the economic activity participants to follow the rules of the jurisdiction. Andrey, what is your opinion? I share the opinion of Vladimir that we don't need to confuse these two things. Moreover, virtual assets, virtual currencies emerged not for a cross-border method of payment, but the key task was, and it is still being solved in a quasi manner. This is the disintermediation process. Now we can see that intermediaries are in place, but this is somehow the mix of different owners of assets, talking about the virtual ones, talking about the digital assets, which are developing in different jurisdictions. There is no other way rather than its development within the regulation framework, depending on a particular country. There is no other way around. And the third question is connected with the development of similar tools on cross-border subnational levels. In our Russian Association of Entrepreneurs and Industrialists, we are working on such a project, which is going to imply the development of converted ruble at a digital level. Now we are preparing for the project. We're trying to get feedback, whether it's going to be in demand, whether these demands are real. We can see that the impetus is given when the regulation framework appears both on national level, but it is very important for the market participants to be active and proactive as when this regulation is being developed in jurisdictions. For example, the Eurasian Economic Union, you need to underlie the regulation on single principles connected with AML regulation, with FX regulation, with currency control, with risk management, and so on and so forth. These are the processes which are important. The subnational process is not going to be very active in terms of regulation if we don't have a shaped position at national level. So you do not want to just to be caught, to be trapped. As I see, the concept is not new. Everything connected with crypto assets, talking about the regulated crypto assets, are just about technologies. We had some coins or the pieces of bronze which were very heavy, then they turned into coins, then they turned into paper. When people moved from gold to paper money, they felt some kind of discomfort. We're talking about the national currencies in a digital form. This is a new technology in place of natural development. As for the corporate currencies, these projects are going to be in demand, which is really the case in some situations. You can see that people require the token Tele2. You can just sell and buy gigabytes. I'm not going to store them forever. This is the digital asset. It is in the local system. It is not quoted on exchange, but it works. The same true is for Aeroflot miles. Someone has a lot, but they don't need. But Aeroflot miles is a gray market. Yeah, then it is transformed in a more convenient story. If it is required, it will work. If it doesn't, it will be just a project for the sake of the project. As for me, this is great if I can buy Aeroflot miles, then I can just enter exchange. If the person doesn't need those miles, the same is true as gigabytes or ROV coin. We can provide it on the market at a discount, which can be used as a payment tool for the services or just to be presented to people who buy very expensive cars.
We can use the the remaining service hours for those purposes. It's another technological step to the extent, and in this story that is already working. The only breakthrough in terms of investment was Bitcoin or any of those cryptocurrencies based on that technology, but which do not have any objective story behind, but for their algos, Bitcoin only exists until a time, abstracting from the fact that it is a pyramid of sorts, but it can only exist until you can buy something with this currency. What and how, we'll just not discuss that now. But otherwise, it would, fall to the ground as the tulips when they stop blooming. Positive or negative examples now? Maybe that's to the last comment. I think that digital assets have more promise than the logical continuation of the desires of the younger generations because they have more functionality within them. Take a coin which is already has the functionality of a balance, and it also includes reporting, something that you don't have even in electronic payments, which require separate reporting. And this is what those currencies offer. And the dynamics of this market, even in this year, testified to the fact that those digital assets are being appraised higher that provide such digital solutions. Like Ether, and they grew by 180% of today, compared with the 63% growth of Bitcoin. Going to another question. Да, я забыл. Can you share with us the story of Bitcoin this year when it almost lost all of its value? And that's drop. What happened there? This is not unique, a unique case for digital assets. And Vladimir was right in saying that one of the key negative elements or traits of the story is that currencies are not really supported by any efficient collateral, and we're talking about virtual volatility to the max. And March of this year proved that you always have to put in and factor in some risk associated with them, and it's probably 60-70% risk factor of the value of the coin and the kickback of the exchange rate. If you put there not only Bitcoin but S&P index, this is something that can happen in the financial markets as well. And so I view this just as another class of financial assets. There's one question from the audience that I would like to address to Alma. But before that, I would like to draw attention to the fact that we launched voting on one of the questions to which we would come a bit later. So I would ask the audience to please pay attention to that voting. And Alma, I have the following question to you. You are claiming to have this beautiful digital ruble, which would be an equivalent of cash and without any interest rate charged or offered on that. Is this what you meant, that it would not really generate any additional income because there would not be any interest income on that? And is it really economically feasible to migrate from the physical ruble to the digital one? And or maybe somewhere it can be offered as well. Good question. And indeed, I believe that the digital ruble will have some interest attached to it, because this is the full equivalent of cash. That's how they actually call it in the report, the digital cash. So it would be strange not to have any interest on that. But we can have both positive and negative interest. And what European consumers do is that they cash out of their bank holdings and keep cash at home. And fiat money, the digital cash is a way out to those cash out attempts. Another point there is that the central bank don't really want to have credit institutions left without any income. And if you have some non-cash money, which have some interest as credit money, they would cater to the needs of consumers, like in this depository and credit form. But for other purposes like settlements, there's a big question about the accounts themselves. They probably would take a different form, unlike today. Would probably be just a register of those digital wallets, and there would be crediting or debiting of money from those wallets, and the register would be run by the central bank. Now, regarding the income of this digital cash, it would not be probably that profitable, but it would remove an intermediary from the settlements. This is quite a danger, and the cards would probably be discarded to the garbage pits of history. But I mean, there's nothing against putting some interest on such digital cash if the central bank is targeting an interest rate. A question from the audience, physical audience, which cannot be heard because it's without a microphone. That the question was probably about any criminal characteristics of this digital cash. But there's nothing there, as the panelists believe. Well, that digital ruble would not probably be 100% anonymous now, but if Vladimir has 100 rubles in his hands, this is his cash, but if he drops the 100 ruble banknote, it would not be his cash, or at least it would be quite difficult to prove that. Well, I mean, if you were like watching me, I mean, you would understand that it would be quite difficult to take the 100 rubles from my hands. Well, I mean, what I meant is what that they don't carry your name on that banknote, unlike the a plastic card. But the digital cash would combine this card identity, but at the same time, it would more or less have a different form or free form of money. Now, central bank is saying that they would not probably keep them anonymous. There should be some identification of the user of such digital money. China is trying to keep anonymity of the holders of digital cash, which makes, of course, such electronic bit quite popular and unique. And the anonymity of the transfer are the key factors behind the use of such money. Alma, thank you very much for your comments. Indeed, colleagues, the way I understand it, when we are talking about a crypto ruble, we are talking about just pure cash, but in the electronic form. That's what I see. Well, I mean, some people, but there's an advantage behind that. So we used to carry coins and paper money. We don't need even those banknotes anymore because we will have just an entry in our electronic wallet, which would win over the cash and remove the cash collection costs and services from cash. Now, if this is a story that this is not going to be personalized and autonomous, we would probably be at least winning over corruption in this country, maybe not over cash. We have a unique opportunity today to, go beyond the framework, the boundaries of our questions, because we may have more time, unlike other panels that were, restricted in their time. Well, Rolf has no direct accounts. And this is cash in your account or on your deposit, but you will have to explain the presence of this money. If you come to buy a car which is worth 18 million rubles, you would be asked where you take this money from. And some people pay cash, which is, of course, quite costly because we have to transport this money to the bank and pay for the cash collection services. Do we have maybe 5-10 minutes? Okay. Just to give you some understanding, we don't have people from retail, but this is one of the technological solutions. There is an automated depository machines. Now, for retail not to pay for cash collection services, they would be using a corporate bank bus, and more or less people put the stack of money into that machine. This is counted and automatically within, I don't know, 5 minutes is put on your account. This is quite beneficial and works nicely now. But this is for the retail outlets. So we're no longer responsible for the money in this vault. The bank is doing that by itself. But this is good in Moscow. But take a retail shop somewhere in Siberia. It is quite costly to, collect this cash. I mean, you need to take rail cars, all sealed and stamped with armed guards, etc. That now you more or less understand that it is actually easier to burn this money in that vault rather than taking this money to Moscow, counting it, and then putting it back into circulation. It's a fact, but it's kind of like a good thing to remember. That's just an idea of people how to minimize the cost of cash collection. But with the digital cash, it would be resolved by itself. There are some illusions that in the foreseeable future, I don't know, in the coming years, we would eradicate this phenomenon of having autonomous, even non-cash money. I don't think it would happen. We would still need some cash or crypto or something. If it is not attached to a person, if it is like an independent asset, it would still be required and demanded. I mean, people would be using bitcoins if there are more restrictions introduced. Andrey, do you want to add something? About anonymity, there's a brief remark there. Central Bank, in its report, is saying that there will not be anonymity. There will be confidentiality, as they claim it, of information. And of course, confidentiality meaning that the information would be disclosed to a certain number of people. And even virtual currencies, they are already quasi-anonymous because there are algos that would help us, based on big data, to more or less understand who did this or that transaction and who is the owner of this money. So, putting these two parts of the formula together means that you no longer would enjoy anonymity. This is some objective story behind. If you pass on this 100 rubles, which dropped to the ground, you would never know where this money goes, unless we're talking about centralized database and with a blockchain. It means that most probably the systems based on virtual currencies would exist for some time exactly for this reason. But they would exist until the time when they become, Ponzi schemes. And, well, it's like you still would not be totally anonymous if you talk to regulators. Now, the outcome of our polling, let's just take a look at that. I think that this is quite an interesting subject to discuss. We had two serious attempts to introduce global corporate digital assets to put them into the market last year internationally. If it happened, it would have been quite a breakthrough, quite a disruption to the movement of money and economic relations. You take Rauan. What do you think? Why it never happened, and when it is going to happen, and whether it is going to happen at all? It was Telegram and Facebook. Well, in both cases, it was about regulatory restrictions. There was a roadmap. There was a project that stumbled upon some formal restrictions and limitations. Even if it never happened, or if it were not about restrictions and limitations in a format that the solution was suggested by the corporations, actually left even more questions than answers about the reliability and safety of those payment instruments. So I would say there were. I think that it's maybe even more successfully launched by WeChat in China or even Sber. Vladimir, how do you think? Why it never happened, and will there be any corporations that would be successful in launching such instruments? About corporate digital assets, I think there will be some successful projects when they are going to be launched for something. I never looked into the motives of those two projects and what was the reason behind Telegram and Facebook, but I think that successful stories would be like, selling megabytes of data by a mobile operator which is called Tele2. This, I don't know. And maybe it was just a hype. Well, for Facebook, it could have been some, advertising. The more I am in Facebook, the more I get. But you should have marketed the idea. Alma, what do you think? In your opinion, global IT corporations, will they be able to launch the currency that would not have this regulatory-based circulation in the world? Maybe they will. I think that is the essence of their work. They all want to see some sources of financing, and this is, I think, the target of many. It was probably too early, and they probably did not have a regulatory framework for that. People were not ready. The behavior was not established for that. There are no good cases, history behind that. I don't think Russia should actually miss the chance. And probably should our corporations should launch the same. They are not probably thinking hard about that, or maybe thinking wrong about that. But I think that this is for the nearest coming future.
There is another interesting area which we now discuss in detail, and that might be very interesting for corporates. The point is that in the background of lower interest rates, there are many investors seeking for different types of investment. Now, this particular type of interest, there is a special platform to finance receivables, so-called retail factoring. This is not a story which takes off, but there is demand in place. There is a lack of technologies, how these receivables can be broken into discrete parts and to offer to on the market. This story can be very, very interesting. We have another question from the audience. The interpretation of the question is impossible due to the lack of the mic. Alma, if the central banks manage to issue the digital ruble, how will the central bank regulate? How will the central bank regulate the issuance of this type of ruble? First of all, this is going to be within the purview of major issuance policy. As of today, central bank issues national currency in cash. It's going to be additional form. This is not additional issuance. This is going to be within the purview of January issuance. I would do that in different areas, depending on the trade development, on economic growth. All these factors are going to underpin the basis of issuance policy for the quarter, for the year to come, and it's not going to deteriorate the issuance process. This is a form of money. This is not the content. It's not going to change anything. So the issuance is going to be different. Yeah. So it's going to be within the purview of the general approach. Andrey, your concluding remarks: when, on, if, and why? As for the issuance of corporate currencies, from my perspective, this is the question of timing, not the policy. They decided to move a different way. They decided to use the hype around that to advertise themselves, and they took very aggressive position as for the regulator function of the state. So the situation of the phone, where even the right idea which will be developing in corporate sector as a part of bonus programs and loyalty programs, in order to automate the moment when the real thing is delivered in factoring and against the payment, for it to be simultaneous to avoid any risks. So at these joints of the bonus and loyalty programs, the connection of the real world with the world of cashless settlements. Today, what we call cryptocurrencies or digital currencies are going to evolve. It seems to me that those who had bad experience, they will transform their approach. They will be under this regulation framework. If we look at the discussion, the major problem, we had 8, now we have 9 people. This is the lack of regulatory. No, I'm sorry. It has to be a different way. Other way around. From my perspective, the legal framework determines the obstacles to the active development of the current program. We are ready to conclude. Let me conclude, say that, as it seems to me, all the regulators, particularly American ones, trying to regulate this industry. Seems like the USSR would have tried to regulate messengers. A closed country, the internet is in place, messengers are in place, but you cannot give the citizens of the Soviet Union an opportunity to communicate with the rest of the world. You cannot have input and output of information. So you cannot but recognize messengers. You need to ask for passport, for application, and stuff like that. It seems to me the global regulators see the threat in these subnational technologies. And of course, they're trying either prohibit or regulate these technologies. What will come out of that, we probably will see in the years to come. Thank you very much for your attention, and I believe that our summit is over. Thank you for your attention.